What's mission prep? Tell me what that's all about.
So anyway, I figured out, yeah, I guess we can just kind of talk just how it all, like, just real quick, how it started and everything. Because I found out about you guys, it must have been a couple of years ago now. I don't remember now. But I was just researching, because I never signed up for the burn pit registry or anything. Maybe I probably should. I came back from my second deployment and then like almost passed out during the PFT, the pulmonary functions test. I was like, yeah, I'm probably fine, man. I didn't do it after my first deployment. They just kind of didn't do it. So after my second, they were doing it. I was just bullshitting with the guy, and all of a sudden he puts one in my mouth, and I'm breathing it in, and I'm like, all of a sudden I can't breathe, and I'm like passing out. It was like this little tiny like cubicle booth or whatever thing we had, and he like runs over and grabs me, and pulls the shit out of the wall, and sucks it in my mouth. He's like, breathe, like, and that's where I figured out. I was like, okay, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And no one ever said like, oh, this is because of all the burn pits you guys were doing, because we were on cops. We weren't even if you are on if you're on CAF, even you're probably getting that shit from that sewage you smell all the damn time. But no one ever said, oh, this is why this is where this came from. It was just like, oh yeah, damn, you developed this. That sucks. Hey, good luck. So I obviously from a lot of the shit you guys have posted, that is absolutely, that's not rare whatsoever.
Yeah.
So can you start by just telling our listeners like what the HunterSeven Foundation is, how it kind of got started?
Yeah. So I spent a while in the military myself. I was never really into the whole school thing, barely passed high school. And I was like, I need some discipline in my life and I have really nothing else to do. And so I was like, I'm going to join the military. Started off as an E1, went up the ranks pretty quickly. I was assigned to an aviation unit and ended up going medical. So a lot of my time was spent on the flight line, medical care, all that good stuff. And so halfway through my career, I got a pretty bad spinal cord injury. And, they said to me, well, here's the med board process. Pretty much your career's over. And I was like, well, shit, I don't know what I'm going to do,
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I guess I'll go to nursing school, which was out of the left field for me. And so while I was in nursing school, I ended up meeting my fiance, Kyle. And he said to me, he was a veteran as well. He served 15 months in Iraq with 2nd Cav Recon attached to 1st Special Forces Group. So he was in Bakuba, all those nice places, 07, 08. And he said to me, a lot of my friends died from Iraq. And I said, well, I hate to sound the way I am, but that's war. That's kind of how it goes, no offense. And he's like, no, they died when they got home. And I was like, well, what do you mean, suicide? Because, immediately when you tell somebody, oh, they passed away after service, everybody thinks suicide, which is a valid point. And I'm not trying to, discredit that. But he said, no, they died from, these weird diseases. And so he told me about his best friend who died at 24 years old from acute respiratory failure the day they left Iraq. And then, his team leader who died from acute myelogenous leukemia, which is almost always directly correlated to a toxic exposure. And then he told me about his Sergeant Major, whose name was, Sergeant Major Rob Bowman, and his call sign was HunterSeven. So we kind of did this in memoriam to him. And it started out as an undergrad nursing student conducting research on Operation Iraqi Freedom veterans and potential toxic exposures. And so that's kind of where it started. It blew out of the water. We were internationally published for our findings. It was crazy. And so now it's expanded greatly to, we have 3 main programs. We focus a lot on education and research. Both of those things kind of coincide with each other. And that's what makes us so unique, is that nobody else does what we do. And I say that in the most humbling way possible. But given that we're all military veterans and also medical providers, we have a unique perspective. And so that's the biggest thing. We're seeing the problem, we've identified the problem, and, I can't prevent your exposures from happening. They've happened, you're home, but I can do my best to mitigate those risk factors and assure that you have, a life full of health and longevity, because right now you see on the news, everything's about compensation pension, pushing this and presumptives that. And that's great. That's great. I'm a disabled veteran myself. I get that, but it's not going to save your life. So we want to identify early and mitigate those risks before it's too late and you're diagnosed with stage 3, stage 4 cancers, or, some kind of terminal illness that we can't help. So that's kind of what we do. A lot of education and research, and we continue to lead the way on that nationally. We have a few studies in the works right now. One actually funded by Black Rifle Coffee that we're just finishing up on. But a lot of good stuff down the pipeline, and it's only going to get better, I guess.
Yeah, totally. So what's the research process look like? Like there's plenty of statistics. And so I'm like, man, these must be grueling to go through, if you're looking, I don't know if you're getting it from peer reviewed articles or if it's just where do you get all this from?
So yeah, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. So it's like I've spent so far, I'm in a PhD program right now, and I've spent a good 8 years with getting degrees, advanced degrees to do the work that we do. And so when people say, oh, well, I do research, and I'm like, no, you don't. You don't. You don't. You just don't. So the process itself is very, very tedious. There's so many different guidelines and rules and regulations. Being a licensed healthcare provider, going through an institutional review board just to make sure that your, study participants are protected. And it's the biggest pain in the ass, but it's necessary, so HIPAA is protected. We're very careful on what we do. And so that's just kind of like the foundation for the legal stuff. And then on the back end, you have to identify a problem. So clearly there's a problem. We can see it statistically that, a lot of people are coming home with reports of respiratory early onset illnesses, deaths that shouldn't be happening, cancers that shouldn't be occurring. And so, we identify a problem, and then we kind of either form a hypothesis or do a literature review based on what kind of research study we want to do. So with this one that Black Rifle Coffee actually funded, I sat down with Evan and I told him, hey, this is what we want to do. And he said, take the money, do it. Let's find a solution. And so it's been about a year. COVID kind of slowed down everything as we all got recalled back to the hospital. But the process is pretty in depth. So we take a evidence-based study tool and we kind of formulate questions based off of that original study tool that are specific to veterans. So our research on Afghanistan was 68 questions, demographics, and it was a retrospective. So it was pre, during, post. We looked at symptomology, diagnostics, MOS, time frame, deployment locations, bases, you name it. So it's pretty in depth, and it kind of helps us identify like where the gaps are, different hot zones for different areas and time periods and jobs. So it's a process, but it's what needs to be done to kind of mitigate these risk factors. So that's where we're at with that.
Yeah, totally. That's just reading. When I read these, I'm like, okay, these guys can't be full of shit. So I'm like, in just like doing my own like research I've done for school, like for physics and planetary science and stuff. Like, okay, I know what I have to put into to make sure my equations aren't fucked up and that I'm not saying something that's wrong. But when you're literally legitimately narrowing it down to like percentages and age groups and when they were deployed, I was like, oh fuck, I was there in 2011. Like, god damn, like all of a sudden I'm like being like, I'm like, psychosomatic, like, oh, I've got all these cancers now, I must, like because it is so specific. I'm like, so I can tell like this is obviously not just thrown together. It can't be,
Right.
So it's nuts. And tying everything together, just the synchronicity of it too. When I was researching into like the Warrior Angel Foundation, when that had popped up like low testosterone, and this was just a few months ago, and then you guys popped up that huge list multiple times of, oh, low testosterone, your, then your estradiol's and your serotonin all being affected. I'm like, oh fuck, man. Like, but it's all like kind of correlated. It's all comes together and it makes a valid point. And then I've researched more into that because of what you posted. It made me research more into like, well, what are the toxins caused by? Is it like phthalates and all this other stuff we're burning? Like, oh shit, it is. We're burning MRE bags, the water bottles. I mean, everything, and we're using GP8 fuel to light it. Like,
yeah, right. And it's interesting that you say that, because like, and this is where, research and education, they coincide with each other and they complement each other so well, because, like a few months back, we were down at Bragg presenting for some of the, the nation's top, special forces fighters, third group, USASOC, you name it, and JSOC, and telling these guys like, hey, I can guarantee that 75% of you in here for the males have low testosterone, and you see like their chest puff up and they're like, no, not me, must be you, you know. And I'm like, no, here's the thing. Your testosterone is not based on how tough you are, how badass you are, how much weight you can lift, or how many, you know, it's not about that, you know. And so when you go overseas, you know, studies show that not only is your diet screwed up, but your sleep cycle screwed up, right? So if you're not sleeping good, you're not eating good, already your body's going to be put under a unique amount of stress. You're not going to be able to focus, which is going to stress you out, especially in a combat environment. And for your job specifically, you know, when your stress goes up, your cortisol level goes up, right? And so if you don't have that even keel where you go up and down and, you know, you maintain homeostasis, if your stress is chronically elevated, sooner or later, your HPA axis and your adrenal glands are not going to be able to fulfill that need of cortisol, and you're going to tank. And that's when adrenal fatigue happens. When adrenal fatigue happens and you hit that downward slope, you know, your immune system goes with it. So when cortisol goes up, your immune system goes down. And then when that tanks, it just keeps going down. So you put your body in a unique situation where your immune system's already compromised. You're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're stressed out. You don't know if you're going to get blown up or shot today. You know, you got family at home, you got bills. It's like the perfect recipe for chaos. And then, you know, as an 11 Bravo, you know, you're walking through, you know, Iraq, through Baghdad, you're kicking open those doors. You know, you're throwing smoke grenades in there, you're throwing frags in there, and you're blowing the friggin' walls up. You know, so asbestos is in the air. You know, you got sulfur in the air, lead in the air. So, I mean, it's just a perfect recipe for disaster. And so, like you were mentioning, you know, the BPAs and the plastics, all those right there are endocrine disrupting chemicals. So anything in that aspect can just wreak havoc on your endocrine system. And so many people don't understand that. And it's so frustrating. It really is. Because it has no direct correlation with how tough you are, how strong you are. Not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's, oh man, like I remember not even being aware of it, like my cortisol being high all the time. I was like, and what it was really doing, how much sugar was just in my blood, like why I was putting on fat in certain areas, you know, and
Yep.
once you trace it all back, and it's like, yeah, but then again, that's, you know, and as I was saying, I really want to like reach out to, like, you know, Dr. Mark Gordon with the Warrior Angels Foundation.
Mhm.
Well, he's not with her. Sorry. But he's the one to give him all the help them or whatever. He's the doctor behind it.
Mhm.
But, you know, with all the research and like gluten and everything, like getting the inflammation down off your brain, you know, and really monitoring what you're taking and the supplements you want you to take, and possibly testosterone replacement, you know, because my doctor recognized all that too, but then he gave me Clomid and my estradiol's are at 85. And he was like, "Are you suicidal?" I was like, "No, but my life sucks right now. And I'm actually just getting fatter. My testosterone is 1500 on a low dose of it. And my estradiol's are 85. He's like, "Oh, this is not good." I was like, "No, it's not." So that didn't work. But so I'm still kind of researching on my own, trying to figure out, and that's why I'm kind of worried. Angels Foundation is a good one, I think, to go into that and figure out, because if it can help me, then I can say that fucking works for me. Then I can promote it to other guys that I'm friends with having the same issues, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's some time getting into
Like
that.
personally, I work with Gabrielle Lyon. I don't know if you know who she is, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She focuses a lot on special operators. You know, thankfully she was like, "Chelsey, I'll let you be one of my patients." But we just started, you know, after I had that spinal cord injury. I mean, I'm about to be 31 years old, and you know, I have a osteoma tumor in my knee, and my back is literally so degenerative and flat because of the injuries and everything seeping out. So, you know, when I go to the VA and the VA is like, "Oh, here's 800 milligrams of Motrin, here's 300 milligrams of gabapentin, here's some painkillers, here's some, you name it." They give me everything under the sun, but it's like a temporary band-aid.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like people like, you know, Mark. I know Mark Gordon.
Okay.
And I've read Andrew Marr's book, and you know,
Mark,
great,
yeah.
great, yeah. And Gabrielle's great. I'm like, "This is my problem. This is what I got." And she's like, "There's so many different routes that you can go to or go through to kind of fix the problem, and not so much just covered up with a bandage, like, you know, Motrin or gabapentin." So, you know, taking initiative on your health like that is so important. So important.
And that's another correlation too, is a causal correlation, is when you're already in some amount of chronic pain from degenerative disc disease, which I have too, and I had an L5 fracture from one of the times I got hit by an IED, you know, and is when you have that pain and they give you the painkillers, it's like, well, that pain is already causing again, your hormone, testosterone drop a little bit because the cortisol and everything. And then they give you something that fucks with your testosterone even more. Here's opiates, which we know raise estrogen, lower testosterone. And now your resistance to pain will be worse. Oh, and now we're going to mess with your dopamine and serotonin as well. So you might become a little suicidal, but hey, as long as you're not having pain at the moment. And that's why, like, who is really pushing this shit? Is it really like, can I really like chalk it up to be that conspiracy theory of the pharmaceutical companies running everything?
So I actually have a list here. It's a secret list.
Ooh.
And it's all of the individualized prescriptions prescribed by the Department of Defense from 2001 to 2011. And so when we go down to, hydrocodone, acetaminophen, so Vicodin, in 2011, we gave over 250,000 individualized prescriptions to active members of DOD in 2011.
Whoa.
Like, that's like the height of the war in both, like we were just pulling out of Iraq and just really kicking up in Afghanistan. And so, like, we have an addictive society, and this is why. It's temporary band-aids like that.
Yeah. Like, why is there a bunch of happy people walking around? They're really pissed off at the end of the day, like coming down, like everyone's so happy. Yeah. Oh man, that sucks. That's kind of just a gross number to have to think about.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like, the anxiety meds, the antidepressants, it's, same thing with tramadol. Somebody has pain or somebody can't sleep, they give them tramadol and trazodone.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Sertraline, Wellbutrin, it's just, and that's another thing I hate, just talk about it. Like we've all been through some shit, and doesn't mean you have PTSD. Like, I personally don't like the term PTSD. I think more of a moral injury. I can't say that I have any problems performing my job. I still do trauma medicine, and it's still, I love it. But do I think about the people that I couldn't save? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when people immediately say, oh, I don't have PTSD, or, oh, I don't need to talk about it, or, I'm so sick and tired of the tough mentality that our veterans have. Like, I get it, but I don't.
It honestly stems from, like, no shit. It stems from, like, that kid when you show up at basic, and there's that guy, the toughest guy in the room is the weakest guy in the room. Like, he always just ends up going AWOL first, like
yeah, I cried my first 2 weeks there.
But he's always like, it's like the guy who's like, you just look at my dick, like, you're gay, man. But he's really the one looking at your dick. That's the guy. It's the guy who's like kind of the pseudo alpha male. He's like, I'm not gonna go see anybody. Are you guys fucking pussies?
I know.
But really, it's because he's dying on the inside. He's like, I wish I had someone to talk to. But then everyone follows that because he said it, so I guess we shouldn't. And it created a whole culture out of that. A whole entire culture of shitty guys feeding in and creating more shitty guys that ruin more families because they were a shitty guy all around.
Right.
And it sucks because it's okay. Because by being the person that figures your shit out, now all of a sudden you have something to offer to people around you. So yeah, it is a shitty way of thinking for sure.
Well, and something like we've talked about on this podcast a million times on, like, what masculinity is, and actually I think our last episode we went deep into that, how it is far more masculine to admit, like, hey, I got something going on here, I might need some help. And like, me not being a veteran, and I have a lot of friends that are veterans, the ones that say, like, I'm good, nothing's wrong with me, I mean, I don't know if it sounds fucked up, but I have less respect for that guy than the guy that says, I might need some fucking help here. And Kevin's my best friend, and watching his, like, I hate the word journey, but that's what it is. Watching his journey through since he's been out to today, and he was that guy who was, I don't need any help. And now today he openly talks about it on our podcast to thousands of people. And he's very open about either post-traumatic stress or his injuries, or like he was just talking about his testosterone and all. I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about that shit, but I think people do need to, because then there's people like me and it doesn't have to be just veterans. I mean, there's people with problems, mental health, stuff like that all over, but people like me on the outside looking in can see a guy like Kevin or a person like yourself who is openly talking about trying to help people. And I think that talking about it helps people more than anything,
Yeah, and I mean, like, personally, a lot of people on our team get this praise. We're all volunteers, but like people will say, "Oh, you're doing an amazing thing," and it's like, and we try to be as selfless in service that we can be. But I mean, like, in some aspect, it is kind of a self-serving thing that we do, because a lot of us we're out of service now, and one of the toughest things for me was being forced out of uniform, being forced out of the military before I wanted to leave, right? So it was kind of like, hey, this is a breakup that you don't want, but physically you gotta, you're screwed up, you can't be here. It was a tough time. And I mean, like, transitioning out of the military and being like, okay, well, now I'm alone. I don't have the people in my platoon. I had 30 people that were underneath me, and it's like, what do I do now? Like, who do I turn to? What do I do? And it's a way for us to give back and continue to serve without being in uniform. And I push that a lot on people. I say, we have people that are like, oh, I'm at my 25-year mark and I'm getting out and I can't wait and I'm gonna do that. I'm like, you can't wait now, but wait till you get there. It's tough. It's a tough breakup. It's a love-hate relationship, but yeah, we try our best to just be, just realistic, and especially connecting. One of our big things is connecting, healthcare providers with veterans, because a lot of the times it immediately gets looped back to PTSD and TBI, and nobody ever thinks about the stuff on the back end. And I mean, as bad as COVID was, it was one of the greatest eye openers for me as a veteran healthcare provider to watch, the healthcare providers that I worked with, in one of the biggest hospitals in the world, Mass General Hospital, and see them kind of go through their own post-traumatic stress and moral injury when we were literally watching people pass away through a glass window, having that sense of uncontrollability and hypervigilance because this alarm is going off and this one's coding and we don't have this medication. And it was very interesting to watch how people reacted to that. And when I said to them, how do you feel now? A year later, how do you feel now? And it's like, they're a totally different approach to mental health overall, but also veteran healthcare when you think about it, because two very similar things between PTSD and that aspect, and then PTSD in the military. So I kind of got off topic there.
Well, no. Like I told you in the beginning, there is no certain topic. We can go wherever it takes us. Well, and like you just said, PTSD is PTSD. It's mental health is mental health. No matter where the injury in your brain came from, it's there, and people need to be open about dealing with it. But to have people doing things like you guys are doing and raising awareness, and like I told you before we started recording, Kevin's the one that informed me about like your guys' Instagram page. I looked it up, and now every day I see your posts, and it's depressing as fuck. But yeah, and it's one of those things, like, I want to support these people, but do I click like because I don't like what I'm reading right now? Right. But it's important that it's out there, that people can see, like the whole, like the burn pit thing. People that weren't in the military don't know about that unless you've heard
a spear.
Yeah, unless you've heard somebody who was there talk about it. And I think Evan, when he was on Joe Rogan, he talked kind of in depth about that. And that was the first time I became aware of it, was listening to that. And then I asked Kevin about it and he told me a little bit more, and then I started following you guys. And that shit's crazy, because I mean, when you're not there, you don't think about what everybody's doing with the trash and with, from what I hear, batteries and everything.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, like, and that's the thing, like, there's some people on TV, yelling about burn pits, and I mean, like, it's crazy because, like, scientifically speaking, like, I was aviation, he was infantry, and so I mean, a lot of the times we weren't on the base, right? So if our rates as aviators, brain cancer in aviators is through the roof. Pancreatic cancer and prostate cancer in aviators in the Navy is through the roof, right? Blood cancers in aviators and the Air Force, through the roof. So especially special operations, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. But if all these forces are not on the bases, what's killing them, right? It can't be burn pits if you're not necessarily on the base or on the COP or on the FOB, right? And so it goes back to that whole thing where your immune system decreases. But, you think about him, I mean, I'm sure he's put more rounds down range than he wants to talk about. But I mean, that's lead, that's that close quarter combat, that's, Afghanistan specifically is ranked the 5th worst country in terms of life longevity in the world, right? The average age expectancy before death is 52 years old. You're most likely to live to 52 years old in Afghanistan, right? Half the population, 50% of the people who are born in Afghanistan die before the age of 7. And you think about that and you're like, well, it can't be strictly burn pits. I mean, in this case it is. They use a lot of their trash to kind of create heat, but those are the things you have to think about, those asbestos issues, those aviation fumes, the JP8. JP8 is definitely a neurological carcinogen. You get that on your skin, it goes into your bloodstream. Can it affect your blood and cause a malignancy in your blood? Absolutely it can. And so, that's why we try to educate the best way we can. And, our Instagram can be depressing, and we try to not make it so depressing, but here's the thing. I want you guys to have an oh shit moment, right? Because like with me, I'm like, well, if it doesn't happen to me, if I don't see it firsthand, I'm not going to believe it. That's just how I am. I'm arrogant and I'm from Boston. So when people are like, this can happen to you, I'm like, no, it can't. No, it can't. Nope. And so those stories, those young stories, and I mean, like, these are stories, we have hundreds of them. People send us hundreds of stories on the regular. And I mean, we want people to be like, okay, I was there, I'm that age, I did this, and this. That could be me. How do I take initiative for my own health? How do I get screened? How do I get checked out? That's what we want to do,
That's a very valid. That in itself can be a circus. Just what you just said right there. Like if I just walked into the VA right now, which by the way, I did last year, about, I got tested for low testosterone and all this other stuff. Okay, they dismissed everything I said and said, well, let's check your thyroid. Like, actually, I have my numbers right here. I don't know, let's check your thyroid again. It's like, but you work at the VA. So maybe we can assume that it's because of everything like you just said. But these are resident doctors who don't know anything about anything you're talking about. Right. VA doctors are resident doctors, unless you're in specialty clinics, which is hard to even get into those. And it's like, oh, are you dying? No, you're fine. Then go fuck yourself. Like,
here's some pills.
Yeah. It's seriously. And then, but like, that's the hardest part. Like, okay, how do I get screened for what, and what should I be looking for? And if you go and take that information into the PCM, and they're gonna be like, well, who gave you this information? And they're gonna try to disagree with you. It's like this ego battle, because they always want to assume you're on Google or something. It's like, what if I was? What if I was on Google Scholar, motherfucker?
Right.
Like, that's about how much you know as a general practitioner. You're not a subject matter expert on anything, and you're in your residency. Like, I don't want to shame your 10 years of schooling right now, but at the same time, like, I've been in the VA enough to know, like, when I'm feeling something and they're telling me something different, like, not to listen, go with my gut sometimes,
So that's,
yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. So we had a guy who passed away, 29 years old, Marine Corps Corporal Patrick Duba. He was assigned to 3-2, and he was a mortarman. And he was in Afghanistan, was blown up a few times in Sangin or Helmand, one of those nice areas. And when he came home, he was 26 years old. He started complaining. He was like, I'm having these severe migraines. My vision's getting worse, nausea. The VA is like, oh, it's TBI, PTSD, here's some meds. A year later, it's getting worse. So 3 years into this poor kid, finally, he's losing vision in one of his eyes. And they say, okay, go to ophthalmology. He goes to ophthalmology and they say, oh, you got a spot on your brain. Go get an MRI. Sure as shit, he has brain cancer. He fought it for, I think, a year. He was in remission, and then it came back like a wildfire, and it took his life this past November. And so, I mean, the rate of being misdiagnosed right now by any healthcare provider, not just the VA, by any healthcare provider is unbelievably high, because you don't expect these young guys, like, we just had a guy who passed away at 36 years old from colorectal cancer. No genetic predisposition, but he had 3 deployments to Africa. So you don't look at a top tier performing Green Beret and think he has colorectal cancer. You just don't, And so providers, they're trying to save money in terms of insurance and what's covered, and they don't necessarily go with that test. But then by the time it is identified and you can't miss it, you know, they're at stage 4 cancer, and he passed away as well. And so, I mean, like, it's things like that that just blow my mind. And we actually spoke with a good friend of mine. She is she was the chief whistleblower protection director at the VA, sworn in official, one of the 11 sworn in officials. And she lost her job when, you know, the election switched, because I guess that's how it works. But she's a nurse veteran, conducted a study that showed only 4% of civilian nurses were able to provide veteran-centric, competent care. 4%. 4%. We're the most trusted profession in the freaking world. We've been the most trusted profession for 30 years. 4% are eligible and able to provide veteran-centric care. That's insane.
Wow.
That's a big fucking problem.
Yeah. No shit.
And so, I mean, like, if you don't go to the VA, which, you know, 75%, give or take, of post 9/11 veterans don't utilize the VA. They go to civilian providers. You know, I'm one of them. I use the VA for certain things, right? So if only 4% of those civilian healthcare providers are on target when it comes to veteran healthcare, like, we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
That's a lot. We're in a lot of trouble. And I mean, you know, I have 490 pages of DoD cancer rates since 9/11 happened, right? And these are just active duty. And to look at some of these numbers and to think, okay, if this is active duty, just active duty, where are we at now in terms of veterans after service?
Wow.
Yeah. And then, yeah, it's ridiculous because, yeah, you're right. They're just, I feel like even at the highest level of doctors, just anybody, because of our culture, it's just about making the money and then going boating on the weekends. It's
Right.
not about, you know, it's not about being an Isaac Newton. We're like, man, I just want to obsess over this one thing and master this. I want to control this. That's just not really I don't feel like that's not really our
Right.
way of life anymore. It's just like, can I get my paycheck in my fucking G6, you know, Mercedes wagon and go get my boat? Like, I don't think anyone really cares that much, because when does it pay to be virtuous in that profession? You know what I mean? Not for everybody. Some people really does, I feel, you know, but I feel like on the whole, like you're saying, you know, it's the 4%, like same shit, like,
Right.
you know, and then and back to that whole, like, what you guys are trying to do, like, how can you connect the right people with the right people? Who are the good care, you know, medical clinicians and medical care providers out there? Like, okay, send me some people that have these conditions that it may be worse than it is. And if it's not, cool, I can give them some relief by letting them know it's not. Like, how can we connect people who really give a shit and know what they're doing with people that might really need it, you know? And I feel like that's just tough on its own. Just that coordination, you know?
I mean, and that's, so when people are like, well, what does HunterSeven do for, you know, veterans in terms of immediate needs? And I mean, like, healthcare coordination is one of the biggest things we do. And so care management, like, I've spoke with doctors at MD Anderson pertaining to medication coverage. I've worked with the home base program in Mass General Hospital to get a veteran who was having severe issues cognitively that needed help. But a lot of it is just coordinating care, because veterans don't really know where to go, who to turn to, what to tell them. And especially when a healthcare provider tells you, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, it's psychosomatic, your PTSD is making all this stuff up, which I hear very often.
Yeah.
You know, then it's up to us to be like, okay, well, who do we know? Who have we vetted that we trust? You know, Gabrielle Lyon's one of them. The docs down at MD Anderson. You know, we're trying to work with the War-Related Injury and Illness Center in New Jersey through the VA that focuses specifically on post 9/11 and Gulf War injury. So, you know, stuff like that is definitely a good portion of what we do outside of, you know, paying for travel for veterans needing treatments for cancers, covering their appointments and medications. It's a lot of coordination, for sure.
Jeez.
Sounds like you stay very busy between your day job and then this one that seems like it might be even more hectic than your real job.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And I mean, like, I deal with codes and strokes and traumas and bleeds and you name it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's exactly what you guys said it is. You know, we have a very tertiary healthcare system that focuses solely on, you know, here's a prescription to cover up this temporary, you know, temporary band-aid just to cover it, you know, down the line. But like if you look at all the older people, you know, like my grandparents, I think they're both on 10 medications each. And I mean, like, really? We can't like fix the actual problem. We just got to throw a medication at it, you know? Then you need a medication for that medication and that. And so somebody said to me one day, they said, Chelsey, you know, if people stop getting sick, then you're not going to have a job. And I was like, well, trying to talk myself out of a job then. You know, it's like I'd rather see people healthy and happy and live long. And you know, this medication stuff it's just temporary, you know.
Yeah, it's better. What's that saying about living a short life worth living versus a long life in a miserable way?
Right.
A long life hanging on by meds, just like I want to be like a sexy motherfucker when I'm like in my 70s and 80s. Like that's the dude, you know, like, oh well, you need Viagra because of this. Now you're gonna need these blood thinners, but you want to thin your blood too thin, so we're gonna give you this as well. Like, oh fuck me, right? Like, oh, then you're gonna bruise really easily, so now we gotta take this, and then
and you know, it's crazy. And that's crazy because like literally, do you know how many deaths happen when like older people on a blood thinner like Coumadin or warfarin or Eliquis hit their head and all of a sudden they're fucking bleeding internally? That's like my everyday. I get that every
doesn't even have to be a head hit. I mean, I remember my uncle when he was still alive, he had cancer in his spine. He found out, I think it was in like 96. He found that out. Never went for any treatments. He said, I'm not going to any fucking doctors. And he started researching online, like natural ways and all this stuff. And the man lived to like 2016 without any treatments, but he was in so much damn pain. He would take like handfuls of aspirin all day. And he started, and he was also blind. He had a lot of issues, really smart guy. And anyways, one day he was one day he was walking out of my parents' camper and he nicked his arm and the blood started going and it didn't stop. He was trying to put like the moleskin on it and he was taking so much aspirin. His blood was like really thin.
Yeah.
And he was damn near passing out. He's like, I'm not going to the fucking doctor. That's just how he was. He was like anti-doctor. And I finally told him, like, do you want to just sit here and die? Because that's what's happening right now.
Those are my favorite patients.
Oh God. Well, he finally went. He went, and unfortunately, he ended up passing away because when he went in, they did another scan and found out his whole body was cancer. I mean, everything. He hadn't had any treatments in however many years it was, and it had spread through his whole body. That's why he was in so much pain. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, the blood thinner thing, like you're saying, I mean, he just nicked his arm and it wouldn't stop. And then one thing led to another. And I think he was a week later he had passed, and he was an older man. He was, I think, in his late 70s and not the healthiest person out there, but
I mean,
those
are my best though. I love those patients though. The ones that come in and they're like, fuck you, what do you know? And I'm just like, yeah, no, you just ate a bottle of aspirin and you're bleeding everywhere.
Yeah.
My favorite. That's why I love my job in that aspect. I really do.
Dude, there's this one thing that's been happening for a long time, but I'm trying to be more aware of it lately. But especially because the fact that I meet or talk to other veterans who have it too as well. I have no idea if this is actually related to like ear injuries from like RPGs coming in or going out, or whatever. Like, say for instance, I go out, start picking weeds. It doesn't happen all the time. That's the thing. It's just every once in a while. And it was like I'm squatting down or bending over to pull weeds out. My blood sugar feels like it gets really super fucking low. I'm about to pass out. My vision's kind of going. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, it jumps up and I'm almost into a panic attack. And then after just lay down for a couple hours. And I was like, it came to me, a lot of vets are like, yeah, it fucking happens to me, man. Like, it's not on HunterSeven's page yet. I'm waiting for it to come up. Like, come on, waiting for that. I'm waiting for that ear one or something.
Yeah, that's actually, so it's funny that you say that because I've had that happen to me a few times too. And you know, not so much RPGs, but literally just the rotor wash from 10 years of sitting in the concussive nonstop. But no, it's crazy. We're still trying to figure that out. There's a few different things. Vestibular injury is a real thing, and TBI related to hearing loss or hearing injury is a real thing. So I mean, like, you think about how your nervous system's all connected and all these different nerves in your brain and your ears. And I think it's your second cranial nerve. I'm not sure. I'm not neurology, but I think it's your second cranial nerve or third, one of the two. I'll get back to you on that. But yeah, there is a correlation. And blood sugar wise, how did you test it after, or did you just get that blood sugar feeling, like that low blood sugar feeling?
Yeah, I was like, I'm craving sugar and my vision's going. And then whether I eat something or not, then the blood sugar goes way up. Like now I'm like almost panic attack mode. Like I got to sit down, my heart's racing. Like I get that. Like if your blood sugar gets slow, maybe your cortisol kicks in and elevated up. But this doesn't matter if I've eaten or not, how much water I've drank. It's directly correlated to sometimes bending over or not. The only thing I've really found online loosely related was, I think it's called ABBV. It has to do with like crystals in your ears or something. They get dislodged. I don't know.
Was it throw off your equilibrium or?
Yeah. Check out, because I mean, like, it kind of sounds like a vasovagal type issue too. Like, so like if you got punched in your sternum, like really hard, like right in between your two bones, like when we get off this call, just punch him in the sternum, right? And you'll get winded, right? And so that sudden feeling, it's almost like a vasovagal feeling. So when you like bear down, or, it's just, check out the vagus nerve, read up on that. That has something to do with it. I personally believe, between your second cranial nerve and your vagus nerve, those two things right there. That's my guess. That's my educated guess.
Educated guess. Yeah.
So I guess we'll talk a little more about you. Like, how long have you been in the field you're in now, since post-military?
So HunterSeven officially started January 2019. So I mean, that has been since 2019, but since I think I started doing the research on Iraq in 2017. I think I was in my second year of undergrad. So since 2017, at first people thought I was crazy. They were like, this doesn't happen to people in real life. And I was like, it does. Yeah, I was the only one in my college graduation class that graduated with nursing honors and college honors, which is funny because I barely passed high school.
Yeah.
It's weird, but yeah, it's been a while. And I mean, like, sadly, there's no short of work. Sadly, it's a tough job, but it's a tough job I don't get paid for. So it's like a hobby, an abusive hobby.
It is an abusive hobby.
But it's a hobby that you're doing a lot of good things for people.
We have a great team. Yeah.
And just the short amount of time I've even been aware of what you guys are doing, I see what the awareness you're trying to raise, and it's, I mean, the world needs people like you to do what you guys are doing. It's unfortunate that the world needs people like you to do what you're doing, but it's a fact, and like me not being a vet, there's a lot of, quote unquote veteran issues that most civilian people don't know anything about, other than they think, oh, there's a crusty old veteran who's wounded and he's got a fucked up brain. Like, that's all people know. And I try to kind of dive in a little deeper being a civilian to kind of understand, especially, I mean, Kevin's my best friend. I've seen him go through shit. And actually, before we started recording, we were talking about Tyr and Nicole, and I saw that post with Nicole, the veteran with a sign, the guy that holds up the sign. She was holding one that said, "You don't have to be a veteran to help." Right. And that like hit me in the soul, because I feel that I want to, and with our little platform we're gaining here with our podcast, I want to raise awareness for issues. And we've had so many veterans on here, and that was not the plan with this. It's kind of like just turned into that naturally, which has been really awesome. And if we can raise awareness for things, and because there's a lot of people that listen to this that are not veterans as well, and a lot of them probably had never heard of the HunterSeven Foundation till right now. And this is raising awareness, and it's like, I'm not a vet, but if I can help in any way, I think people should strive to help people.
Yeah, and so you don't have to have. Sometimes it's hard to be virtuous if you don't have direction. So it's like, all right, tell us what you want us to do, right? And then we can assist in that virtue, not to virtue signal. Like, again, I love who's one of my favorites, who's Kierkegaard. because he's about when he's talking about the ethicist versus
Mhm.
the aesthetic, right? The
Right.
majority of people on Instagram right now are chasing the aesthetic or the vulgar aesthetic, right? Like they're just gonna be virtue signal and send shit that's all fake and smoke and mirrors. But with the ethicist is like, no, I'm doing this because this is something. This is just part of me. For some reason, I'm doing this. The action comes first, and then maybe the congratulations comes later, and that's okay. I like that affirmation, but it's not why I'm doing it. And that's why I believe your page is truly a virtuous page, because this isn't easy. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like, and so it's funny that you say that because, social media is so, I hate it personally. I think it's one of the worst things in the world. But there's so much good going on behind certain like social media, like Black Rifle Coffee. We talked about that. Like Evan's one of the most generous people I've ever met, and he's one of the most realistic people I've ever met because he's lived this and continuously he gives back. Like when we had COVID hit up in the hospitals, he donated like a fucking truckload of coffee and just like nice things to the departments, the fire departments, the EMS departments, the police departments, and the hospitals. And it was just through Tier and Nicole too. And I mean, it's just amazing. And like a lot of people don't know, have you guys ever heard of Noveski rifles?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you think about Noveski and you're like, well, like you think a badass gun company. And I mean, that's what they are. They're a badass gun company. But what sets them apart is literally when you talk to the owner of Noveski, the wife of John Noveski, who's passed away, but you talk to his wife, Lorena, she's one of the most selfless, serving people in the world. She would give you the shirt off her back. And when I say that, she's one of the people that actually funded us to care for like 5 different veterans. She gave us a very hefty grant to help out people and didn't ask for anything in return. No, smoke and mirrors. It's the thing I love about certain companies. Same thing with Doug from SoFleet, like I'm wearing the shirt right now. he's another one. He has a bitchin' mustache, but on the back end, he's there for the mission. And a lot of companies, they'll say, oh, we're great, we do this, but at the end of the day, it's like social media is just a small fraction of the possibilities, and it's only a small fraction of what we do. It's probably only 5% about what we do. Everything else we don't showboat or put out there because we don't have time. We're too busy trying to help people. But the social media thing, a lot of it's smoke and mirrors, like you said. So finding those organizations and those people that are true to the mission and true to the values that align with yours is just so critical.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Like that's where this kind of the podcast has been going. We keep on aligning ourselves with people with similar values, and we're not trying to be biased whatsoever. But when we meet someone and we're like, hey, you should have this person on, they're also good, and that keeps on happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, you find a good community of good fucking people, and it's just hard now to like go back. Not that I don't want to. It's just hard to just like, okay, can I go talk to someone who like, knits stuffed animals for a living? And
Yeah.
and just like, my real passion is like tying myself up and just like, like do weird shit. Like,
I could if you're looking for somebody like that, I could probably find. I mean,
yeah. Like there's some weird people over there.
Well,
yeah.
like what Kevin's saying, like when we first started this podcast, it was, some people we knew that were interesting. We'd have come sit down with us. Nobody's fucking listening anyways. And as it started to grow and we've met people like yourself who are out there doing fucking good things. And I mean, we don't personally know you, but you seem like a pretty cool fucking person.
I'm all right. Yeah.
You seem like I could see sitting down and just hanging out. And that's happened with a lot of our guests, where whether they own a multi-million-dollar business or whether they're just trying to help people like you're doing. And it's good fucking people. And there's a lot of, and that's the good side of social media. We were just talking about social media is you can find good things and good people on social media. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do now with this podcast, and it's just, like I said, it's kind of organically happened. We're trying to highlight those people and we don't have a huge following, but we do have a following. And I want the people that listen to this or the people that follow along on our social media to know there's people like you and your organization out there doing things to help people,
dude. And that's a good point. Like between what you said and what she said. So I was reflecting on what you said and remember what she said. Like social media is disgusting and kind of good at the same time. Social media reflects the human condition, right? If you are already a strong, when I mean strong, like you've faced your demons, your bullshit, you've acknowledged it, and you've tried to heal yourself, you can use social media to be positive and promote something. Just like if you found yourself and then you became a millionaire, right? Like Evan, you know this didn't change him as a person. He's already the same person. But if you got wealthy before you figured your shit out, now you're fucked up. You're a selfish prick. If you started your Instagram before you were a healthy person, you're probably just showing your tits and your butthole off all the time. Like,
Hey, I still am.
Don't mention any names. Don't mention.
yeah, like it's a very, if you're looking at it from that lens, you look at your Instagram and say that person's sad, that person's unhealthy, that person's angry at the world and hates everybody because they hate themselves. And it's just kind of sad when you look at it for what it really is versus someone you can tell like, okay, based off their content, this is this person's got their shit together. They're at a level head. I like this person, you know?
Well, and it's come up multiple times in this podcast and every fucking podcast we do, Black Rifle Coffee. Like I've had people tell me like, why do you guys talk about them so much? They're not a sponsor. They're not this, they're not that. And what we're talking about now is why, because of the good things that company and Evan Hafer does for people. That's why. I mean, I'm wearing a Black Rifle hat right now. They will always have our support and most people's support. And I'm sure this will come up because we had told you next weekend we're going to sit down with quite a few people who work with them, and it's like we have had more people from that company on this podcast and talked about them and given them endless free promotion because we ride with what they're doing. Like we believe in the good things and like you said, the donations. And I know during COVID they donated to small businesses and
Big time.
it wasn't all veteran related either. They're just trying to fucking help people. And that's why I like that company so much.
No, same with Mountain Primal. They've donated so much money.
Mountain Primal, who is one of our sponsors.
Really?
And and to the boot campaign, they donate a lot of money to that place. And most of the time people don't even know they donate the money. And they do it out of the good of their heart, which that's another reason why we fuck with that company because
right. Is that what that sticker is right there?
Yes, it is.
I keep seeing the spear thing, and I'm like, that's a bitchin' picture.
It is.
Yeah, that's Mountain Primal. We've had their founder on our podcast and their head marketing guy.
What is it like? Is it like a Butcher Box but better?
Kind of, but better. Yeah. So I guess here's a shameless plug for them right now. They have a big cattle ranch in Colorado, and the founder of it, John, he kind of went a different way than most cattle ranchers go with selling your meat, and he started doing it online. So when you order from him, you're getting his cattle and pork, I believe, and bison from Bison Union. They're together, but they ship it straight to your door, and it's really high quality stuff. So, but I don't care about how high quality their stuff is. They're good people.
But that's
I mean, I care about quality. I'm gonna order some right now.
But that's the thing though.
Hey, if you do, use our code.
Yeah.
What's your code?
Mission Prep.
One word.
Get yourself 50% off. But
yeah,
no,
get you a little discount.
That's what I liked about when I actually got their meat in person is every meat company you get, because the guidelines for grass fed, like for instance in Idaho, it has to be, I think, 65% of the grass feeding season, which is like 31 days. So really when you said it's grass fed beef in Idaho, it's not very fucking long, by the way. And those numbers may be loosely wrong because no human has a computer brain, right? But I'm fairly accurate on that because I'm somewhat intelligent. So, but all the packages says like no hormones and like grass fed and all that. I don't remember it saying any of that on their packaging, but it is. It's grass fed Highland game, no antibiotics, but so that's what's funny about these guys. They're all about working hard and having a good lifestyle. But they're not sitting there shoving all that shit in your face, even though it's what they're already doing anyway. Yeah. That's why I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for that integrity.
Well, I do care about quality, but I'm just saying, like the people that run the place, like they have my support. Yeah, but their quality could go down. I'd still support them because of the good things they do.
But they have
the type of people.
But they have top quality meat.
Yeah, and it's the same with Black Rifle. Their coffee is fucking good. I don't care and I'm kind of a coffee nerd. They have good fucking coffee.
Yeah.
I'll have to show you when we get off this. I'll have to show you my my sweet coffee thing that I have made. So I'm big into the whole giving back to the community. I literally have a refrigerator right here, full of Black Rifle coffee, like in my office. I'll always support those who support, our mission, because, you only hear, like, I think a recent study said that, a little bit over 7,000 people died in combat in post 9/11, right? And then about 5 times that, 30,000 on the lower spectrum died from suicide. And when I tell you right now, easily over 100,000 have died from cancer, quote me on that. Right. And so when people actually listen to our mission and they're like, okay, we see what you're doing, and we see like the impact that you're making, and they're like, hey, we're going to give back however possible. Like, there's some companies that are balls to the wall, willing to help us, and more so willing to help the veterans that we serve and work alongside, and the community that we come from. Right. It's like, these are my teammates. Like, these are people that we both served with. It's definitely a great a great community, and I do love meat. So
Yeah,
that came
yeah.
out kind of fucking weird.
I do love meat.
We both fancy meat in our mouths as well.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, already knowing about from following you guys what you guys are about, but after talking to you today, like, you guys have our support now. If we ever make it fucking big with this podcast, which maybe one day, I mean, you guys have our support, because that's what we're about. We're about good fucking people.
Yeah.
And we say that, I say that endlessly, good people, but the world needs more good people, and the world needs to be aware that there's a lot of them out there.
And the world needs more bikini barista stands with Jake and Kevin in them. And
With who?
Me and Jake.
In bikinis? Did I hear that right?
Yeah,
Bikini selling
baristas.
coffee.
Yeah, we're going to be bikini baristas. We're going to make our millions, and we're going to support everybody.
You need to get Heather Lynn on here. That's what you need to do. You need to get Heather Lynn on here, because I mean, she is like the barista bikini, like, gun-toting. You're gonna have to fight her. Listen, we'll set up a fight. It'll be in the ring. We'll get some we'll make like a meat ring from Mountain Primal, and we'll get some like sauces in there. I just got my shipment from Tacticalories, and that stuff, they don't sponsor us. We don't get free stuff from them, but their stuff's amazing.
Mhm.
Just like a sauce fight, you know what I'm saying? So bikini barista sauce fight for charity, for HunterSeven.
There we go.
I think it's a great idea.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Where can everybody listening to this find what you guys are doing, and how can they donate, or whatever you guys do donations? Go ahead and give us the spiel.
Yeah, so I mean, if we definitely appreciate donations. We're a 501c3. All money goes back into the foundation to help those in need. Zero comes back to me. Like I said, I'm an ER nurse, so I make great money doing my real job. So if you want to support, definitely check out HunterSeven.org, spelt out HunterSeven.org. But more so, go and educate yourself. We put a lot of stuff up on Instagram. That's a big deal. Educate yourself, especially if you're a veteran. If you know a veteran, be like, hey, listen, you need to check this out. You might have been exposed. You kind of want to scare the shit out of them, but not enough where they just, shut down. So definitely check it out. Ask questions. Be your own best advocate. That's the best advice I can give. Be your own best advocate.
Awesome. And we'll put your website and everything in the show notes, so anybody listening to this can go click on it right from there and go check out what you guys are doing. Also check out your Instagram, because that's a good place to kind of see what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, so we appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we made this happen, and we'll continue to support what you guys are doing.
I appreciate it.
For sure.